You're listening to Keith Angle, the host of TGI Sports Talk on the National Streaming Sports Roku channel.
Hello, everybody. Good to have you with us. I'm Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talks, National Streaming Sports Talks, Jack and Keith's Weekend Playbook. As you know, from a couple last shows you've seen, I'm away. And the next show you see after this, I think after this, we'll be back live. Welcome in, Jack Hirsch, Hall of Fame boxing writer and all-around sports guru. Welcome, Jack. How are you today?
Good, Keith.
We're going to, today we're going to talk a little bit about something we haven't even had a chance to dive into, and we're already, 9 or 10 games in some cases, maybe into the NBA season. It's a long season, so we've got a lot of time to talk about it, but we'll get into some of the hot starts here and players that we're watching today, and maybe even get into, we'll get into some comparisons with players Jack and I have enjoyed watching in the past, and a little bit how the game is today compared to those teams. Jack being a Knicks fan, like me.
I'm actually a Net fan.
Oh, you're a Net fan,
but I'm not. I'm a very soft Net fan. I'm not a devoted Net fan. I'm an indifferent Net fan.
You're a front runner Net fan.
I'm a front runner when it comes to the Nets. I'm a loyal Yankee fan no matter what. I'm a loyal Jet fan no matter what, even though I'm a realist as far as evaluating them. But I'm an unloyal Net fan. I'll go back and forth. I go back to the ABA days with the Nets. Okay, when Luke Hornacek was their coach, even people don't realize that.
I remember those days.
And players, the 2 championships that they won with Dr. J, Kenyon Martin, but let me tell you, with Dr. J, when you look at Dr. J's career, people think, well, he won 1 championship, and they think of the championship he won with the Philadelphia 76ers when he was with Moses Malone, when Malone predicted 4-4-4, meaning 4-4-4, and actually they lost 1 game, so Malone came very close to being a perfect prophet, but he won 2 championships in the ABA, so when you think of Dr. J, think of him as being a 3-time champion, not a 2-time champion.
The ABA never really got, there were some teams that did well and got absorbed into the NBA, obviously. But they never really drew. They didn't get a TV contract, which is what really killed them. And I don't know if the Nets would ever have made it in this market, because even when they were winning a championship, the Knicks were still king here. Being a Knicks fan back to when I was a young boy, and I have to go back that far to get a championship myself. So we're in the same boat there, I guess, as long-suffering fans, because it's 50 years, over 50 years for both of us. What drew you to the ABA? Was it just
No, they merged.
No.
Indiana Pacers became part of the NBA.
I'm talking about you. How did you become a Nets fan and the ABA?
You grow up, you're young, the new league is starting. You tend to like the new league. For example, the AFL, the American Football League. I was a fan of the American Football League that the Jets happened to be, and I wasn't an NFL fan. And I was, same thing with the ABA, new league. I was an ABA fan in hockey, and I'm not the biggest hockey guy, but I was an Islander fan because they were the new team. They came into existence when I was really young. So that was my team. And it made me understand a little more why so many people were Met fans. You had a ready-made New York Yankee, championship team, a dynasty. Yet when the Mets came into existence, they outdrew the Yankees by a substantial margin, not even close. But some of it was the Brooklyn Dodger bounce back, because a lot of the Met fans happened to be Dodger fans and getting a new franchise, and the Mets would bring back old-time Dodger players. Heck, Duke Snyder, Gil Hodges became Mets. Even Yogi Berra was a Met player for a couple of games.
They played in the Polo Ground, so they had to have some Giants people there too, I would think. So that would be my guess.
Now, I once said something for fun, Keith. if you had to say any franchise and pick the greatest player position for position, as long as they played one game for the franchise and put them all in their prime. I mean, just think of it. You could have Willie Mays playing center field for the Mets, Duke Snyder, in right field, Robbie Alomar at second base, Gil Hodges at first base, Yogi Berra catching, et cetera, et cetera. So you could have a lot of fun with a dynamic like that.
You need a time machine, but you could certainly do that.
Yeah, well.
And you could do that in the NBA too. Imagine a team, right, with Reed and Clyde and Dr. J. Oh my gosh.
No. They weren't on the same team. Dr. J was in the Nets.
These guys all play for the Mets and Dodgers. Right.
Yeah.
But I guess who did play for both the Nets? We had Michael Ray Richardson. Who else played? Was there anybody else who played for both franchises?
Jason Kidd, right?
Jason Kidd, right? He played with the Knicks near the end of his career. Yep. I think his last season. I
don't think of him. It's hard to remember his time with the Knicks, even. It's so inconsequential to me.
It was last season that he played. I'm pretty sure it was with the Knicks. He had some good years with the Nets, though, and went to back-to-back finals.
He was incredible with the Nets. For a couple of years, he was a superstar. I know this is insane, okay? You might consider it, but Jason Kidd, for a couple of years at his very best, was every bit as good as Magic Johnson, every bit as good. And if I had a choice of either guy at peak value at their very best, I don't care if you give me Jason Kidd. I don't care, because he's going to be the way he carried the net teams to the finals 2 years in a row. He carried them on his back to a large degree.
Those were good teams. Byron Scott was a coach, if I remember right.
Well, I won't say they weren't that good a team. They
were good enough to get to the finals, though.
Because Jason Kidd carried them there. Jason Kidd meant as much to the Nets, every bit as much as, let's say, Allen Iverson meant to the Sixers when he took, helped carry him to the finals.
That's fair. And similar circumstances.
Everyone acknowledges Jason Kidd is a Hall of Famer, but people don't realize that he was an absolute superstar for a couple of years with the Nets. I don't mean just a great player. I'm talking about a superstar.
What hurts Jason Kidd in that regard? He had some problems off the court. Does that hurt him? Was it the market he played in for most of his career in Dallas? And
No. Outside of a couple of years where he was off the charts, he was outstanding still. But he wasn't a superstar player throughout his career. He was just a tremendous player, tremendous. Okay, and he was selected for all the Olympic teams. He'd have the longevity, coming out. He had a big name coming out of college, coming from Cal. And listen, when you talk about the 10 greatest point guards in the history of the NBA, Jason Kidd makes the list easily. If you talk about the top 5, to a lot of people, he sneaks into the number 5 slot, I think.
Does he? Does he, though? Oh, for his whole career. I get what you're saying. For a couple of years, he's as good as Magic. He's as good as anybody else. But
absolutely,
look at the entire body of work. Is he as good as Magic with the entire?
No, not the whole body of work. Part of it too, and I hate diminishing any great player, because you need the right teammates to win. You really do. But Magic had a peak Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kobe Bryant had a peak, Shaquille O'Neal. Michael Jordan had a peak Scottie Pippen. What did Jason Kidd have? A peak Kerry Kittles, like I said a while ago.
That's the first name I thought of too.
If you flip-flopped some of these players on teams, how would they do? Let's be honest. If you put Magic Johnson on a regular good team, he would elevate them without question. He's not going to have 5 championships. Magic likes to judge things based on his rings. I'm better. I have 5 rings. You have 2. You have 3 or whatever. So he says that proves I'm better. Well, you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Not at his
you had the top 5 player of all time playing with you. You had James Worthy, a Hall of Famer.
I'll give you everybody. I'll give you Kareem, but Kareem was on the backside of his career for most of Magic's run there. You have to
not for the championships. No, not for the championships.
In the mid '80s, he'd been around for 15 years.
The last championship, Kareem was slipping a bit, but still came up with big performances.
But when they won at 84, he had to be 35 years old, for crying out loud. I'm not saying he wasn't a great player still, but he wasn't the player he was in Milwaukee or his first few years in LA. Kareem.
Well, they lost to the Celtics in 7. He was in his prime, and that's when Magic had that horrendous series. Horrendous. Yeah. I can't believe how bad Magic played in one series, for whatever reason. And then the next year, the Celtics won it, and Kareem was still at a high level, but the slippage was starting a little bit. He was still outstanding, but not quite the same. That was Magic's last championship, right?
80, yeah. He lost.
He didn't win one after Kareem, was gone.
No, they lost, I think, in the finals one year, if I'm not mistaken.
Michael Jordan's Bulls. Yeah.
And so Kareem never won without. I've got to give you that. He never won without Bar. So
Kareem won a championship before he got to the Lakers with the Milwaukee Bucks. With the Big O Oscar Robertson.
With Big O, he lost. I think he was. They were 1-2 in finals, though. 1-1, I think, weren't they in finals?
The Big O is past his peak. That's the only thing that bothers me about Kareem. What you just mentioned, 1-1. The 7th game for the championship against the Boston Celtics, he got outplayed by Dave Cowens.
Yeah.
Okay, and that bothers me about Kareem. It was all on the line. It's not like he got outplayed. And if they were down 3-2 and he got outplayed, that's bad. And then they lose 4-2, that's still bad. But 3-3 and you see the finish line and it's all on the line. And Cowens was a great player on his own right. But no one talks about Dave Cowens as being one of the top 10 centers of all time. Even though if we sat down and we studied it very carefully, maybe we could find him a lower spot on the top 10. I'm not saying we couldn't.
It'd be close. I mean, he's got championships. He's got MVPs. He was pretty good.
But you will not. You're obviously not going to put Dave Cowens ahead of Shaquille O'Neal. You're not going to put him. No. You're not going to put him. You'll pick Hakeem Olajuwon over him. You'll pick Wilt Chamberlain over him.
Wilt, Russell, the two guys you just mentioned, obviously, Kareem, so I'm up to 5. Where else am I going to go?
Well,
where else am I going to go?
You'd have to do some heavy thinking. Well,
Willis Reed better? Is Willis Reed better than Collins?
Jokic.
We got to think today.
Right. I mean, we don't think of guys being traditional centers per se, but that's just Jokic's position, really, in reality. Guy, any player who plays the middle. So, listen, I put Dave Cowens ahead of Robert Parrish, for example. I put him ahead of Bill Laimbeer, guys like that.
How about Willis Reed? I wouldn't put him ahead of Reed. Healthy Reed, I wouldn't put him ahead of. I think career-wise, Cowens played longer, so I think he's got a better body of work.
Reed was a small center who should have been playing forward.
So was Cowens. Cowens about the same size.
I think Cowens was a little bigger.
I think they were 6'8", 9. 2 of them.
Maybe I'm missing something here, but it's close between Cowens and Reed. It's close.
Would you agree, Willis Reed?
Bill Walton. You'd have to rate a healthy Bill Walton ahead of Dave Cowens. And if we start thinking more, I mean, if we're really digging back into time, Nate Thurman, Walt Bellamy.
Great.
Delmo Beatty.
Some great players
George
there.
George Mikan.
You grew up with George Mikan, so you got prejudice there. But
I want George Mikan. Here's a little trivia for you. Okay, I don't know whether you knew this or not. You're pretty sharp. You know your stuff, Keith. When the ABA first came into existence, the commissioner was George Mikan.
Yep.
And George Mikan went on a radio sports talk show. I think it was Bill Mays' show, but someone I think was sitting in maybe from Mays. I can't say for sure I know that, but I called up as a kid. and I asked him, how does the ABA compare to the NBA? Now, Mikan hated the NBA. To him, it was personal because something went down between him and the NBA. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe you know, but I don't.
I don't.
And when I asked him how the ABA compared to the NBA, he says, we think we're as good as them right now and we'll be better in a couple of years. Okay, well, I don't know what he based it on, but
they were plotting. I mean, one big thing that could have been a linchpin for the ABA is, I know from reading a book I read recently, that they were all in on getting Alcindor at the time to the ABA. I mean, they offered him like $1 million in cash to forego his senior year at UCLA and jump to the ABA. And he was this close to doing it. I can't remember what killed the deal, but he backed away. And George Mikan really wanted that to happen. And that's probably why he thought they were on their way, because if they could have got a player of that caliber.
No, I'll tell you what happened. I remember he was drafted by both the Milwaukee Bucks and the NBA, and the Nets had us right in the ABA. I'm not sure whether the Nets had it through a draft or whatever.
They had a weird thing. They had a weird territorial draft they did in the ABA, I remember. So, right?
Right. And the Nets, he asked both teams to make him their best possible offer right off the bat. He's not fooling around, Kareem said. Lou Alcindor at the time, make me your best offer and no strings attached, and that's that, and I'll make a decision. Well, Milwaukee made one offer. The Nets made an offer. And then they came back with a second offer, and he was kind of put off by it. And he said, no amount of money is going to, test my integrity, after the Nets were coming back with another offer. The Nets didn't do what he requested of them to do. They were kind of like playing games, in his opinion.
Right.
So he, right off the bat, wound up taking a little less money to actually go to the NBA. Had the Nets bowled him over with an offer, he would have been a Net. And
I wonder if he ever really got his money.
He was a Net, and could you imagine him being there with Dr. J, Rick Barry? Could you imagine you assemble that team? Can you? And the ABA would have had a dynasty team in the Nets, and just pay those guys, give them top dollar to keep them. They would have been better than the NBA team. And then you build around them. I mean, just the idea.
So do you think the ABA would have thrived if Jabbar went there, or they would have forced a merger sooner?
Good question. You never know. You never know, because how would the other teams have drawn?
Yeah, and they didn't. These guys were playing.
Exactly. You just don't know. They were playing out on Long Island. They were playing some games like at St. John's University, the New York Nets at the time. Then they have the Nassau. Then they went to the Nassau Coliseum. But, we'll never know what would have happened had he gone to the ABA. But the ABA had some other terrific players like George McGinnis, to come up. They had Artis Gilmore. I'm not sure I don't remember what Artis Gilmore exactly did in the NBA. I don't think he did anything really significant that kind of blew you away.
He was a good player with the Bulls, but played on a bad team, so he didn't do much. And I think he went to the Spurs after that, or maybe, I think it was the Spurs after that. So he was okay, and he was making all-star teams early, Artis Gilmore, but he wasn't, carrying anybody to championships. He was a good player, though. That Kentucky Colonel team was a great team. You talk about the Nets, right? There were a couple of teams that got really, I think, screwed during the merger. And the Colonels just folded. They had a great team. We talked about the Nets, and the teams that came in were the Nuggets. Who were the Nuggets? The Nets.
Dan Esso. Yeah.
Yeah, the Spurs. And I think that might be it. I think was there 4 teams or 5? And then they had
more than that. The Virginia Squires.
No, they didn't come in. They folded.
So they didn't come. No, they didn't merge. No, right. They didn't merge.
They folded soon after. They had Irving in the Nets.
Rick Barry got himself off the Virginia Squire team and onto the Nets. He had a strategy. If he used it today, do you know how terrible it'd be for him? He says, I don't want my kids growing up with an accent the way these people in Virginia. And then he imitated them. Can you imagine a player using that today to try to force a team? He gets suspended. There would be such outrage.
He wasn't a great guy, Rick Barry.
He wasn't a nice guy.
No.
You know what
Great
happens
player.
to these guys when they're in a position of power the way Rick Barry was? He had his nose up in the air. And what even happened with the Nets, for whatever reason, like when he was with one team, I forgot the exact scenario, but the broadcasters knew him and he had a great relationship with them. But then when he went elsewhere, they tried to talk to him and he says, no answers for anyone in the press. He kind of like turned away. You know, some of these guys, they don't get it. A Sparky Lyle was even funny in his book, The Bronx Zoo. Fran Healy was his bullpen catcher a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So Fran Healy was retired by the Yankees, and they made him a broadcaster. So he tried to interview Sparky Anderson. He says, Sparky, how is it to be in the bullpen all the time? And he says, darn it, Fran, you've been there the last couple of years. What are you asking me this?
I was just thinking while we were talking about the merger, the guys who made out the best during the merger, and I'm sure you know the story, the guys who owned the St. Louis Spirit.
Marvin Barnes, I think about.
Well, I think about the two. I think there were two brothers that owned the team, and they agreed not to go as part of the merger for a piece of the NBA TV contract forever. Their family will get paid forever.
Whatever happened to that? Didn't that get resolved?
They're still getting paid, as far as I know. At least a couple years ago, they were still getting paid.
Wow.
Anybody ever made in sports, I swear to God.
I think the NBA wanted to go to court about it, and they did. And a judge, the last I heard about it a while ago, a judge told them both sides to come to an agreement so he doesn't have to rule. Well,
maybe they had a final payout, but they collected for 50 years at least. That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, without question.
That's interesting. I didn't expect to go down that road with the ABA, but that's cool. I like talking about that. I didn't have access. I don't know how you watched games. I think HBO, when it was young in its infancy, when I was 12 and 13 years old, they would show some games now and again, but I don't know where you realize.
I didn't know that. The local channel, like WOR Channel 9 in New York, they would show some net games. Oh, let me tell you who did the broadcasters for the net games. The great Marty Glickman, one of the all-time great broadcasters.
Yeah.
And great Hall of Fame broadcaster. And you know who did games with him? 1 year?
John Sterling.
No.
He did do games, though, didn't he?
So this will blow you away. He's a Hall of Famer.
I don't know. Bill Russell.
No, I'll give you a hint. He's a Hall of Famer, but not in the sport of basketball.
Oh, interesting. I have not got a clue.
Okay. He's a baseball player who played a little bit for the Harlem Globetrotters.
Bob Gibson.
Bob Gibson. Let me tell you something. As great a pitcher as Bob Gibson was, and as intelligent a man as he was, as good an interview as he was, if you talked to him and had a mic, well-spoken, smart, he was the worst broadcast I ever heard. And let me tell you why he was the worst broadcast I ever heard. He never said anything. And at the end of the first game, he said that he broadcast to Marty Glickman. He said nary a word. And he said at the end of the game, well, I'll have more to say going forward, but this pace was so quick. The pace was so quick for him, he couldn't keep up to say anything. I mean,
or in baseball, I guess.
Some remarks. I would have handed him a sheet of paper with 30 things or so to say. And one of them, whenever they take a long shot, say the player shouldn't be heaving up long jump shots like that. That's a bad percentage shot. And the other one, they've got to, be a little tough off the boards. I just give them generic things. I actually did that once. There was a competitive game of basketball in one of the schools.
Yeah.
And the guy who had to coach an emergency, one of the teams didn't know anything about basketball. I gave him a list of things I wrote down to say. The only mistake that he made, okay, is when his team had the ball and they were dribbling up. He misread it. He said, tighten up the defense.
You mentioned your boy John Sterling. Didn't he do Nets games for a while?
Did.
Yeah.
He was just he's just a so-so basketball, broadcaster to me. Great radio baseball broadcaster. Like I said the other day, I loved him doing baseball. He was so-so. If you called John Sterling up and you at that time and you had a suggestion of how you think, he could do his job just a little better.
Yeah.
He would go off on you like, how dare you tell me, a peasant like you. He wouldn't use the word peasant exactly, but he treat the person like that. How dare you tell me? How dare you question my work? I mean, what the heck do you know? Like that would be Sterling's attitude.
I was not a big fan, and he likes the big time people. I think, as you said.
Absolutely. Listen, Mike Francesa, very condescending guy.
Oh yeah,
nose is up in the air. I'm not a Mike Francesa fan as a person, based on what I see on the air. You never know if you know these guys personally. You might like them a great deal, and the perception might be different. I realize that. But I understand, and I'll tell you right now, Mike Francesa is a condescending snob, a know-it-all.
100%.
Compared to John Sterling, he's the consummate
That's pretty bad.
Gentleman. That's how bad Sterling was. That's how rude and obnoxious John Sterling was as a talk show host.
That's pretty bad.
It's so long ago, and someone would say, get over it, Jack, move past it. Nah, believe me, I don't walk around thinking of John Sterling in those shows. But we're talking sports, we're on the air talk show host, we're evaluating it.
I got to find some of those somewhere. I got to scour YouTube, see if I can find some audio of Sterling. So, because
Sterling would tell people after, well, you don't like what I talk about, you don't like what I say, don't listen to me. Just don't listen. Something? It got to the point that I took him up on what he was suggesting. I stopped listening to him.
Well, there wasn't a lot of choices.
A guy who was like that kind of rude to people.
Yeah. Now you got choices. Then you didn't. You probably didn't have anybody else to listen to.
No, you didn't. Listen, and you had a lot of these talk show hosts. They had issues. Look, R. Rush Jr. could be very testy.
Yeah, I remember that.
But he could go both ways too. He could try to be patient and so on, and whatever.
Mike, you mentioned Francesa. I bring him up a lot on my shows because people get on me for my prognostications, right? Francesa's never been wrong because the tapes disappear of any time he makes a wrong prediction of anything. The tapes are suddenly gone. Our predictions are here and they live on forever, just so everybody can know that.
Well, I don't know who's going to go back on it. But anyway, that's what kind of bothers me. There's a lack of accountability. If you say something, go out on a limb beforehand. You see this during the NFL games all the time, even the NBA, any league. After the fact, they question whether something, should have been done if it's going to be done, beforehand.
I like first guessers. I'm wrong a lot. I like to be a first guesser, not a second guesser. I hate second guessers.
Some of these broadcasters, I have a hard time stomaching them. An NBA team could be down 4 points. They got the ball on the inbounds pass. So they could be down 3 points. 3 points, 8 seconds left. And the broadcaster will say they don't necessarily have to go for 3. They have 2 timeouts. They could get a 2. They could foul. And then they could this. Come on, you idiots. They're like 8 seconds. There's not 42 seconds on the clock. Or the term, whenever they tell you there's plenty of time, that means there's not plenty of time.
Who if you like? You know what? I like this actually. Where we're going here, we should have done the show about announcers because I like this. Who did you like when you were started listening when sports radio really hit? Right, Mike and the Mad Dog were. Pete Franklin's a big name that comes up a lot. I used to be able to catch him out of Cleveland. Another guy who was obnoxious as hell. Everybody seemed to have that same shtick until like WFAN came on the scene and got big. Were there guys that you did like, and if you had gone that direction, you would have liked to emulate yourself after?
I don't know, emulate. I like Bill Mazer, who had the first Talk Sports show.
Yeah.
I like Bill Mazer a lot. I kind of liked R. Russ, but he got carried away on the race issue to the point where it was a turnoff. Now, listen, R. Russ had every right to be mad, upset.
Yeah.
With how his career was delayed, based on racing, it had to be in part, too. But there were other issues involving him too, supposedly, that held him back to a degree.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to get into that. I like Mike Francesa too to listen to a point. I didn't like his attitude at times, like the know-it-all attitude. He always had his nose up like he's superior. Talk shows. I like Michael Kay on there.
I like Michael Kay better on his talk show than on the Yankee games. I can tell you that. Yes.
I like him on both. Okay, actually, because I what you try to visualize, Keith. This is what I do with a lot of people in general, public personalities. The cross-country trip. If I had to ride from New York to California, who would I enjoy sitting next to, who I wouldn't enjoy sitting next to? Some people I feel I get along with great. Others I wouldn't get along. I think I'd get along really good with a guy like Tom Brady, for example. We'd get along good.
I'm sure you would.
Yeah, I think I get along really good with Michael Jordan. We'd get along,
Not so sure.
But some of them you kind of wonder. The ones I wouldn't get along so great. John McEnroe would bore the heck out of me. He'd be in a mood, whatever. He wouldn't have too much to say.
Could be entertaining or in a mood, yes. So half the trip would be good. It's funny because I have a very similar way of how I judge people I don't know. I tell my wife all the time, I'd like to have a beer with him, right? That's how I judge people. I'd like to have a beer with that guy. And if I don't
that's why you and Bill Parcells, where I could love to see you guys have a beer together.
We tried to have a beer together, or at least I did, and it didn't work out well because Bill was.
I think people in higher positions, Keith, they look at a way like who you are, in a certain sense. It happened to me. There was an award banquet for the Boxing Writers Association of America. During the time I was the president, it was at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. One of the honorees, I'm not going to say which fight it was, well known. He's walking by. I'm trying to stop him because I just want to tell him the program quickly, reinforce he has a time limit, so on, when I'm going to call on him, what time, because the whole thing was scripted. And he's kind of like, stops, looks at me, and it's blowing me off. I can't get the words out, like who I am, even, like leave me alone. Like his head was up in the air, his nose up in the air.
Yeah.
Later, he comes back to his management team, who I'm talking to, and they introduce him to me. Oh, this is the president. Now he changes his demeanor. I'm worth his attention now.
That's interesting. It's funny. We're talking too about the choices. There weren't a lot of choices back in the day. Interestingly enough, up here in the capital area, in the Albany area, Albany, Saratoga, when I was a kid, 1975 into the early 80s, you would think there would be nothing up here. You had like 3 or 4 choices of decent guys doing sports talk radio up here at a time where it wasn't even a big thing nationwide. So it was very interesting up here.
Or were they entertaining? That's the thing. I think you have to be entertaining, first of all.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like to talk about generic things. I like to talk about players and so on. We're talking generically now, which I try to avoid.
That's
People
all right.
like to hear the broadcast. Look, football, I like Al Michaels a lot. I've always liked Al Michaels doing the games.
I'm old school. I'm kind of old school. I'm a big Pat. I was a big Pat Summerall guy. I love Pat Summerall. I actually liked him better.
Him and Tom Brookshire.
I liked him better with Brookshire than I did with Madden, actually, and they were great. So they're kind of 1 and 2. Summerall, Brookshire, and Summerall, Madden are like my 1 and 2 guys. Love Dick Enberg, another guy I loved. But it's interesting because his longtime partner Bob Trumpy just passed away here a few days ago. I thought they were tremendous together. I don't listen to games now. I half the time don't have the sound on. Or I've got it down.
I like to have the sound on because they're going to give you some information you otherwise might not have access to.
But all they do is they never stop talking. Tony Romo never stops talking. Never.
Well, you have to look. I look at it this way.
They smothered the game.
If I could go to a game with Tony Romo and hang out. And the thing about Tony Romo, he gives you the impression he's like a fan, even though obviously he's more than that. He has a certain enthusiasm level like a fan. You picture him as being the guy sitting next to you. Madden is like the guy you're having a beer with, like you mentioned before. You can sit down with Madden, watch the game, and have a beer. I was on a family cruise. And my son-in-law is a big sports fan. He talks about Francesa. His opinion of Francesa is pretty much what mine and yours is completely. So I'm watching the game with my son-in-law, and this young kid, for some reason, is near us sitting, and he keeps asking my son-in-law questions. My son-in-law is answering, but not paying the most attention to him, being minimally polite. Okay? Being polite, but not enthusiastic. And I said, you're treating this kid the way Francesa's treating, it's the way Francesa would treat you if you're asking a question.
I got to tell you, if you sat me down and said, you got to watch this entire football game with Tony Romo sitting next to me, I wouldn't make it through half of the first quarter. I'd be out of here.
Yeah, but it's like a fan, and that's what Madden is to a large degree. Now, certain guys, you can stop. Like if you had seen Madden walking in the street and you stop and say, John, it's okay, ask you a couple of questions on football, he would stop and he would talk to you. You get the impression. And then there'd be a crowd around him.
And never stop talking.
Drew Bledsoe didn't like Tony Romo. He came out with something not long ago.
I think because he knew he was after his job, and I think he did a few things that were not quite savory in Drew's mind. And again, Drew was done pretty much with the Cowboys. He wasn't much of a player anymore, but he didn't like some of the things that Romo did to try to ingratiate himself with coaches. I know this. So anyway, look at Tony Romo made something out of nothing. I mean, he was undrafted free agent. Nobody gave him a second thought. The first big moment of his career, he fumbles a field goal, and he ends up being the highest paid announcer in history. So I guess he did something right in his career.
Well, you look now, Tom Brady, how would you evaluate the job he's doing?
Yeah, I've only seen him maybe once and heard him, I should say, once, I guess, this year. He seems to be a little bit better than he was last year, but not marginally better. I'm still not seeing a guy that I would, I'm dying to hear, boy, I hope Brady's doing the game today.
Yeah. No, he signed a 10-year deal for $375 million. Olsen, for some reason, the first name, I think of Matt Olsen.
Greg Olsen. Yeah.
Greg Olsen. I always think of Matt Olsen, the Brave first baseman.
Yeah.
People are making a big thing. Oh, how great Greg Olsen is. Put him back on instead of Brady. Greg Olsen was no different from Brady in calling the game. Greg Olsen was okay. I mean, he didn't blow me away. He didn't have the personality of a John Madden. How could you take Greg Olsen off there? And there's a feeling of entitlement, and maybe even Greg Olsen felt that way. How can they do that to me? Well, guy, you're lucky to have a job with CBS. They're keeping Fox, they're keeping you on, even if it's the second team you're working for. You see, where I think Brady went wrong was this way. I think he's doing okay. But I think when you're paying a guy $375 million for 10 years, and I realize they're having him do other things for the company.
Yeah,
I understand all that. You wanted to see Brady be outgoing more. So Brady's not calling guys out on things. He's not getting animated. He's not being the same way he was as a quarterback. As a quarterback, he would get on guys.
Yeah, but don't you think part of that? Don't you think part of that is a relationship with the Raiders, and he's going to criticize guys that he might negotiate with as free agents later on? I think that's part of the reason
he shouldn't be doing it. He should not be doing the job.
I agree 100%. Agree 100%. Well, since we're on this topic, I want to do something that I think will be fun. I hope you do. Just throwing this at you. So you've got to listen, and I'm going to go 3 sports. Maybe we'll get a fourth if you think you can do college football. In each sport, if you had to spend eternity listening to 2 guys call a game in each sport, and I'll start with football, who are you listening to? You got to spend eternity every day, every minute listening to these 2 guys.
I mean, 2 guys historically or today?
Forever. No, at any point in time. And pro football.
I mean, I like Joe Buck and Troy Aikman.
You're good. I'll take Summerall and Brookshire myself. How about baseball?
Yes, but I got the feeling, just let me detour a little, evaluate. Got the feeling that Brookshire just, wasn't as knowledgeable as Troy Aikman. I think Troy Aikman's tremendously knowledgeable, the insight.
Too knowledgeable.
Brookshire wasn't bad, but okay.
I think you would get inside story. You get different type of information from Brookshire, not football nuts and bolts, right? You get behind the scenes stories about players, his playing career. You get that type of stuff. I like that.
It's a hard one to answer because you're even saying in baseball. I mean, I could say, for example, entertainment, Vince Scully and Joe Garagiola.
I would agree with that, and I'd throw Tony Kubek in just for a good.
Tony was not. Tony was very knowledgeable. The thing with Tony Kubek, very analytical.
Yeah.
Tremendously analytical.
Yeah, I like Tony a lot, and I love Vince Scully. And Garagiola was, fun. So I think it's a great.
And I'm going to tell you, and there's a difference involved. I don't know where you're going to mention NBA or whatever.
Nope, I'm going to the NBA next. Yep.
I'm not really sure, but I know yesterday on tape delay, when the Knicks were playing, their game was on ESPN. I switched to the MSG network that it was also on because I wanted to hit Clyde Frazier, even though I hear him all the time. So not that he analyzes the game any better than them, but he's fun. Yeah. He's fun the way Clyde's like a fan joking around this and that, and he has wisdom on top of it too.
Yeah, I was going to actually say Frazier, and all of a sudden I'm forgetting his partner's name, who's the lead guy on NBC too. What's his name?
Croswick?
No. He's doing the games today with. Oh crap! It'll come to me.
You know who I didn't care for, and I realized I only have a minuscule amount of basketball knowledge compared to him. UB Brown. UB Brown was so.
Oh, he was great. He was great.
Oh, he was great.
Yeah.
If you want to take a basketball course, you want to learn everything about the game. But generically, as a fan, as far as entertainment goes, making the game fun, he didn't make it fun to listen to, but he was so intense. It was as if he was coaching the game.
I'll give him my NBA.
Give me Dick Vitale's enthusiasm first.
Well, you can pick him for college basketball. There you go. But for NBA, here's my group. I'm going to throw Frazier out only because he's a regional guy. I'm going to say the team that worked on NBC during their heyday, Costas, Bill Walton, Steve Jones were tremendous. I thought as a group, Steve Snapper Jones were tremendous. Walton was just like unbelievable.
Walton was like a fun guy in his thing doing it. It was like a personality thing.
So college basketball, Dick Vitale, got to be there.
Like Billy Packer.
I would go with Enberg. Actually, you know what? I can't take Vitale. I'm taking Enberg, Packer, and Al McGuire. Loved him.
Yeah, but you named 3 guys, not 2.
Well, they did the job together,
they
though.
did it with him. Yeah, they alternated.
Sorry, a team, right? Not just 2. It could be 3 guys. College.
Wait. Basketball. Did Johnny Most have a partner? Johnny Most. Did he have a partner?
I think he might have. That was in a day. Him and Chick Hearn. I think they did the games together. They did the games together.
You gotta love a guy.
Did them alone.
You gotta love a guy who says, "We got hosed on that call." You gotta love that. Why can't we have more of that today? You know what bothers me, Keith?
You like
this
Holmes?
Is what bothers me a lot. So when someone is broadcasting a game and you're saying, well, they have to be impartial. Yeah, under normal circumstances, I agree. But if a player has played for a team his entire career, loves that team, I don't want to hear them being impartial. Not at all.
I agree.
A-Rod works for the Fox Network. He says, I always root for the Yankees to win. I don't want to hear take him off. Troy Aikman. If Troy Aikman says, yeah, I want the Cowboys to win, but I can call the game down the middle and I can criticize them, that's good enough for me. I don't want to hear a home team's broadcaster being completely detached. I want Michael Kay, David Cohn, Paul O'Neill to want the Yankees to win. If they really are impartial and they don't care, I don't want them there. That's what I didn't like about Tim McCarver. Tim McCarver was completely detached from any team he was working for.
Tony Kubek was that way. Tony Kubek, too, when he worked for the Yankees, was that way. That's one of the reasons he got fired. He was too hard on the Steinbrenners, so he got fired.
Well, that was a personal issue with him and Steinbrenner, because he said Steinbrenner managed the Yankees like it was an expensive toy. that wasn't calling the game per se. That was just talking about, Steinbrenner.
Yeah. I like guys who can be homers.
And he wasn't working for the Yankees at the time. Kubek was with NBC and he didn't get fired over that, from what I know.
No, he did call regional Yankee games for a couple of years and he got fired. 100%.
But I don't think he was calling the Yankee games at that time.
Oh, he may not.
Yeah.
Well, no, he might have got fired later on. I mean, he wasn't with them but a couple of years when he came. Yankees had some good announcers back in the day. Jim Cott was great. Tony Kubek was great. I'm going back before this current group. Bobby Mercer, I loved. He's my favorite player. He's my favorite announcer. They're
pretty good now. Joe Girardi's very good.
He's not bad. And the Yankees are streaming down. They're going to, it's going to be pretty much, they want, they've had about 6 guys on their roster and they rotate them in and out. You never know who's doing the game. But they fired John.
Certain guys they like. I mean, Paul O'Neill's all right. He doesn't move the needle for me that much because he's very conservative. But certain guys, it's hard. A team doesn't want to move on from them because they're legacies. Paul O'Neill was George Steinbrenner's favorite play, I think, during those years. And I think Hal Steinbrenner is aware of that. His dad wouldn't want O'Neill, who was the Yankee Ultimate Warrior going elsewhere. David Cohn's got great insights, and he's on the national scene with, ESPN. Cohn is too good to be let go. Michael Kay has traditionally been the Yankee play-by-play man. And are you really going to get someone better than Michael Kay? He has this.
Not on a regional level. I mean, no.
No, on a regional. That's what I mean. He has this great enthusiasm level, Michael Kay. I think he brings a broadcast. And you compare that to the Mets. The Mets are really, excellent with Gary Thorne, Ron Darling,
too.
Hernandez. I mean, they're really, good. They're really solid.
By the way, I think the Mets have advantage on announcer teams because those 3 guys are going to be there every night. And the Yankees, like I said, they mix and match. You never know who's going to be there. But
great point.
But they've moved a bunch of guys out. John Flaherty's gone. There's 2 or 3 guys gone that won't be there next year because they want more continuity game to game.
I think Jeff Nelson as well. Yeah. You need the continuity, but I also understand it's a long season, and if you're Michael Kay, you don't want to get on the plane to go to Oakland for 3 games, then Anaheim for the Angels.
When you
I'm all for especially the West Coast games. That's the time you can give your broadcasters a little bit of an in-season break, perhaps, that they're not traveling all the time. Well, a guy like Paul O'Neill lives in Cincinnati, and you're going to have him do 162 games a year. He's going to be away from home the whole season. Man.
Oh, yeah. I think the Yankees miss Ken Singleton. I like Ken Singleton a lot. I think they miss him.
He retired. Yeah, he was good.
I liked him a lot. Well, that's interesting. We went off on a totally different tangent than I thought we were going to go. That's fine. We talked no NBA.
Well, with time broadcasters, that's what happens. I mean, you got to have to make adjustments. It's calling an audible.
I wish I'd thought of the topic before we started. This is a better topic than going down the NBA.
Oh, no, we were talking, the NBA with the broadcasters, and like I mentioned, Johnny Most before. I kind of like that to a point. You have to be able to call a game very objectively, what the players are doing, so on, calling them out if you think they're doing something wrong. Yeah. And that's what I like about Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman absolutely would like to see the Cowboys win. He was a career Cowboy, but I think he calls it very fairly.
Let me ask you, because you said Joe Buck and Aikman you like a lot, and I don't mind them. Actually, of the guys that do the games today, they're probably my favorite, quite frankly. But you look at people here in New York, they think they hate all New York teams. They think Joe Buck hates everything to do with New York.
No,
Giants, Jets, Yankees. When he did baseball, he hated the Yankees. I don't see it. I think he's pretty objective.
You want to know something? It's irrelevant as long as you can call the game down the middle fairly. He can hate the Yankees.
Yeah.
You got to be fair about it.
But it doesn't come out in his broadcast that he hates New York, does it? I don't think it does. Do you?
Well, one of my favorites, going to another sport, when Jesse the Body Ventura was a broadcaster for the WWE, and Vince McMahon was behind the mic. Vince McMahon was talking about all the upcoming places where they were going to have wrestling shows.
Yeah.
And he said, and then on this date, we're going to be at Cleveland. And he says, I don't want to go there. I hate being going to Cleveland. And McMahon said, no, Cleveland's a lovely city. And Jesse the Body Ventura said, it's a miserable city. It's a dump. And then McMahon said a moment later, and then the following week we'll be in Las Vegas. And Jesse the Body said, that's my type of town. I was cracking up laughing.
That's a great, I tell you, I don't follow wrestling anymore, but back when it first came on USA Today, and Jesse the Body and Mean Gene Okerlund, and these guys were all announcing, it was hilarious. I loved it.
Well, you go back to Ray Morgan when he was the broadcaster?
I don't go back that far, no.
Yeah, I go back a little before you. They used to have this guy, Ray Morgan, and when a guy was about to get pinned, he got basically knocked out. Morgan's line was, good night. And we'd always have Bruno Sammartino in the dressing room, and when the villain was beating up the good guy, all of a sudden Morgan would say, in comes Bruno Sammartino. He'd be running down the aisle. He'd come in the ring to save the day. He'd either save the day, another villain would hit him on the head with a chair, knock him out, and Sammartino would say, he'll pay for it with his blood. And that would be the build-up for the big show at Madison Square Garden.
There was a lot of good times. I think wrestling kind of jumped the shark quite a while ago, actually.
People forget how iconic certain athletes were in their time compared to someone else. And I was thinking, like, later on when Hulk Hogan was truly iconic, arguably the most iconic wrestler in wrestling history, arguably. But you could also argue that Sammartino was that based on how he was in his era. Just like I was once speaking to someone who was, a big Derek Jeter fan. Oh, man, how Derek Jeter's so big, which he absolutely is. And they had a hard time comprehending because they were like a bit younger. Well, Mickey Mantle was bigger than Derek Jeter. They couldn't understand that. Mickey Mantle is more iconic, at least was, than Derek Jeter. Now today, if you have someone take a vote at this moment, maybe a little of the shine is worn off Mickey Mantle because years have gone by.
Yeah.
And Jeter's still kind of prominent. You see him in commercials, Fox Network, other things. But Mickey Mantle was bigger, just like we mentioned Mike Francesa. He said something once about Joe Namath, which was right. He says, people forget that Joe Namath was Michael Jordan big. During Namath's absolute peak, Michael Jordan wasn't more popular than Joe Namath, but
No.
Jordan's has lasted for a long time, and Namath, had a few years of a window.
You know what happens, and I see this a lot. When I grew up, and I'm sure when you did, when you started following your team or following whatever you were following, you also learned about the history that went along with it. And I find in the more recent generations, they don't do that. That team started to exist when they started following them, and they don't know anything about it previously. And I think that's a horrible way to go about it.
You make an unbelievably good point that I was actually thinking of earlier today. When we talk about the greatest of all time, when are we starting the discussion? You talk about you talk about position for position in the NFL. Now, Jim Brown's name always enters the discussion as a running back, and to many people, he's number one. And the reason for that, in part, is because Jim Brown remained very relevant after his NFL days were over, and he kept reminding us of that. But if we talk about the greatest quarterbacks of all time, why isn't Johnny Unitas' name ever getting into the discussion? I'm not saying he should be number one, but why isn't his name in discussion? If you ask me, or you ask the average person, who's the greatest quarterback of all time, and they're going to say, well, Unitas 1, Brady 2, something like that. In football, I mean, Unitas had 3 championships.
The game, I think it's a couple of things. Recency bias is always a thing, right? Plus, kids don't learn about history, so they don't know the history of the game. And also, the game's changed so much, right? The numbers that Unitas put up outside of the championships are dwarfed by what goes on today because of the way the game's played, right? So you have to say, and it happens to all the quarterbacks from that era because they weren't throwing 50 touchdowns a year and 5,000 yards. You threw for 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. You had like the best year ever back in the day. So
after we're gone, what are future generations going to say about Tom Brady, Peyton Manning? Is Peyton Manning even going to be so,
probably not
as big as he was? I mean, we don't know, because the big debates, 2 big sports debates, aren't hardly even talked about anymore. They're not talked about. Boxing, for example. Who would have won between Jack Dempsey and Joe Louis? No one even comes up with that, but that was one of the great sport debates of all time. People would be arguing it for decades, but at some point, I mean, it must have been maybe about 1990, it ceased to exist. And the other, Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell, who was the greater player, that used to be the equivalent of LeBron and MJ.
Yeah.
In other words, 50 years from now, no one's going to be discussing who is greater, MJ or LeBron.
It's always a recency bias in anything we talk about, so it's fair.
It was Brady and Manning for a while, but Brady, had so many Super Bowls, it was hard to put Manning ahead of him just based on the Super Bowls. Even though you could do that, you could make that argument. The vast majority, they come up with a term for guy and it sticks. One of the terms, Brady, they said, oh, he's the GOAT, and it catches on like wildfire. It caught on with Mariano, greatest closer of all time. Everyone's starting to talk about it. And certain terms, come up, and we just get caught up in the terms, and people go crazy with it.
Well, you know what? There's a lot. We could go on for like 4 hours probably talking about all of the topics we've talked about today. So this has been a fun hour to kind of do a filler. When you guys see us next, by the way, we should be live after this show with our next show, which would be on the 21st. Our next live show after you see this should be on the 21st of November. And I'll miss you guys while I'm gone. I'll miss Jack while I'm gone. But good job filling in on some of these filler shows, Jack. And I look forward to seeing you live again on the 21st.
Same here, Steve.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Keith Engel for Jack and Keith's Weekend Playbook.